You know that saying, "Mom always favored my sister"? Well, turns out that little family truth was about to become the most expensive lesson of my dear sister's life, and I got front row seats to watch the will reading wipe that smirk right off her face. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up sitting in that sterile law office, watching my sister's world crumble in real time. Growing up, I was the responsible one. The one who stayed home on weekends to help Mom with her medications after Dad died. The one who drove her to doctor appointments, grocery shopping, church on Sundays. Sarah? She was the fun one. The one who showed up for birthday dinners and Christmas morning, all smiles and expensive gifts that probably cost less than my monthly gas budget from driving Mom around. Mom would light up whenever Sarah walked in the room. "Oh, Sarah's here. Sarah, tell me about your new job. Sarah, you look so pretty." Meanwhile, I'm in the kitchen doing dishes, and I might as well have been wallpaper. I told myself it didn't matter. Family duty, right? Someone had to be the reliable daughter. But then Mom got sick. Really sick. The cancer diagnosis hit like a truck, and suddenly I'm juggling my full-time job with daily hospital visits, insurance calls, and making sure Mom's house doesn't fall apart. Sarah? She sent flowers. Beautiful, expensive arrangements that made the nurses coo about what a thoughtful daughter Mom had. "She's so lucky to have you girls," they'd say, and I'd just smile and nod while mentally calculating how much those flowers cost versus the gas money I'd spent driving back and forth to the hospital every single day for 3 months. The worst part wasn't even the unequal effort. It was watching Mom's face transform every time Sarah breezed in for her weekly visit, like someone had plugged her into a wall socket. She'd sit up straighter, fix her hair, ask the nurses to bring her the good lip balm. Sarah worked so hard, she'd tell anyone who'd listen. "She's so busy with her career. I don't want to be a burden." A burden. I was there every damn day, and she was worried about being a burden to the daughter who showed up when convenient. When Mom moved in with me during her final weeks, I thought things might change. Maybe she'd see who was actually taking care of her. Maybe she'd realize that showing up matters more than showing off. Nope. Sarah would visit on weekends, bringing takeout from Mom's favorite restaurant. See? I remembered, and suddenly I was invisible again. Never mind that I'd been sleeping on the couch for 2 months so Mom could have my bedroom. Never mind that I'd learned to change IVs and administer morphine, and had become an expert at reading the subtle signs of whether it was going to be a good day or a bad day. Sarah brought Chinese food, and she was the hero. The night Mom died, Sarah wasn't there. She was at some work conference in Denver, probably networking over cocktails while I held Mom's hand and listened to her breathing change. I called Sarah when it happened, and she cried pretty tears over the phone and promised to catch the first flight home. She made it back in time for the funeral arrangements, swooping in with opinions about caskets and flowers and readings like she'd been involved in any of the decisions leading up to this moment. The funeral director kept looking to her for approval, even though I was the one who'd been handling everything. "Your sister has such a good sense of style," he murmured, watching Sarah rearrange the flower arrangements I'd already approved. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by his cheap tie and explain that style doesn't wipe someone's ass or hold their head while they throw up from chemo. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching Sarah orchestrate Mom's final performance. The funeral was beautiful. Sarah gave a eulogy that made everyone cry, talking about Mom's strength and wisdom and how she'd taught us the importance of family. People hugged her afterward, told her how sorry they were for her loss, how much her mother would have loved the service. Meanwhile, I stood in the corner, accepting casseroles and condolences, feeling like a background character in my own mother's death. But then came the reading of the will. Mom's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, had been her attorney for 20 years. He'd known both of us since we were kids, had watched me grow up in his office during the times I'd drive Mom to update her documents or handle the estate planning after Dad died. He'd also watched Sarah make her rare appearances, usually only when Mom was updating her will to include some new gift or provision. "I need to add Sarah to the safe deposit box," Mom had said during one of these visits, about 2 years before she died. "She's so good with financial matters." Sarah, who'd declared bankruptcy 3 years earlier and whose credit was so bad she couldn't get approved for a store credit card. But sure, she was good with financial matters. The appointment was set for the following Tuesday. "Both daughters, please," Mr. Peterson had said. "Standard procedure." I should have known something was up when Sarah showed up in her best dress and that smile. The one she'd worn to every family gathering when she was about to announce some accomplishment or achievement that would make her the center of attention. We sat in his office, mahogany desk between us and years of family history, about to be divided up into legal language. Sarah kept checking her phone, probably calculating how much she'd need to take off work to clean out the house, figure out what to do with all of Mom's things. She always said she wanted me to have the china Sarah had mentioned during one of her funeral weekend visits, and I think she'd want me to take care of her jewelry. You know how sentimental I am. Sentimental. Right. Like the time she'd borrowed Mom's wedding ring to wear to a work party and then forgot to give it back for 6 months. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and began reading, and I felt my stomach clench with familiar dread. This was it. The final confirmation of what I'd known my entire life, that being reliable and responsible and present counted for nothing compared to being charming and fun and occasionally thoughtful. "To my daughter Sarah," he began, and I watched her sit up straighter, that smirk spreading across her face like she'd just won the lottery. This was going to hurt. But I'd been preparing for this moment my whole life, hadn't I? I'd get some token amount, maybe a piece of jewelry or some furniture, while Sarah inherited the house and the savings account and everything else that represented a lifetime of Mom's love and approval. I closed my eyes and waited for the blow. But as Mr. Peterson continued reading, something strange happened. The words weren't adding up to what I'd expected. Sarah's smile was freezing in place, and I felt my heart starting to race for reasons I couldn't quite process yet. "To my daughter Sarah, I leave my collection of porcelain dolls, as she always admired them. Porcelain dolls. Not the house, not the savings account. Dolls. And the sum of $5,000. $5,000. My mind scrambled to process this. That wasn't how this was supposed to go. Where was the rest? Where was the house, the investments, the family money that Sarah had been so casually confident about inheriting? I opened my eyes and looked at Sarah. The smirk was completely gone now, replaced by confusion and something that looked almost like panic. "To my daughter, who has been my constant companion, my caregiver, and my greatest comfort in these final years." Wait, what? "To my daughter, who sacrificed her own comfort to ensure mine, who gave up her bedroom, her social life, and her peace of mind to care for me." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This couldn't be right. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. "To my daughter, who was there for every doctor's appointment, every difficult day, every moment when I needed someone to depend on." I was gripping the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles were white. Mr. Peterson's voice seemed to be coming from very far away, and I could feel Sarah's eyes boring into me from across the room. "To my daughter, who loved me not just with words but with actions, not just with gifts but with presence, not just with convenience but with sacrifice." The room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. This was exactly the opposite of everything I'd been preparing myself for. "To my daughter, who earned every bit of this inheritance through decades of devotion and care." Sarah made a sound, a small, strangled noise like someone had punched her in the stomach. I looked at her, and her face was completely white, that confident smile replaced by something that looked like terror. "I leave the remainder of my estate, including my home, all savings and investment accounts, and all other personal property not specifically mentioned above." The remainder of the estate. Everything. Mom had left me everything. And then Mr. Peterson looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before when people looked at me instead of Sarah. Respect. Approval. Like I was finally being seen for who I really was instead of who I'd never been. The total value of the estate, excluding the $5,000 and personal items left to Sarah, is approximately $473,000. $473,000. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't process what was happening. But I could see Sarah's face. I could see the exact moment when she realized that her entire life strategy had just backfired spectacularly, that all those years of being the fun daughter, the easy daughter, the daughter who didn't ask for much because she assumed she'd get everything in the end, had just cost her almost $500,000. The smirk was completely gone now. In its place was something I'd never seen on my sister's face before, the realization that she'd been playing a game she'd never understood, and she'd just lost everything. And for the first time in my life, watching my sister's world crumble, I felt something I'd never felt before. Victory. The silence in that office was deafening. You know those moments in movies where time stops and everything goes into slow motion? This wasn't like that. This was more like someone had hit the pause button on reality while my brain tried to catch up with what the hell had just happened. Sarah was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Her mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water, and I could practically see the gears grinding in her head as she tried to process this cosmic joke. "This has to be a mistake," her expression said. "This can't be right." But Mr. Peterson was shuffling papers with the calm efficiency of someone who'd delivered plenty of these surprises over the years. He wasn't acting like anything was wrong. He was acting like this was exactly what he'd expected to read. I don't understand," Sarah finally managed to say, and her voice came out all thin and shaky. "There has to be some mistake. Mom always said, she always told me." Mr. Peterson looked at her over his reading glasses. Mrs. Williams was very clear about her intentions. "She updated this will 6 months ago, and I can assure you she was of sound mind when she made these decisions." 6 months ago. Right around the time Sarah had missed Mom's birthday because she was in Cabo with her friends. Right around the time I'd been sleeping on the couch because Mom's pain was getting worse and she needed help getting to the bathroom at night. "But the house," Sarah said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. "She always said I'd inherit the house. We talked about it all the time. She said she wanted me to have it because I appreciated beautiful things." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to stand up and scream, "No shit, she changed her mind," at the top of my lungs. Instead, I just sat there, watching my sister's world implode with the kind of fascination you'd have watching a car crash in slow motion. "Your mother was very thoughtful about her final decisions," Mr. Peterson said diplomatically. "She spent considerable time making sure her wishes reflected her true feelings about how her estate should be distributed." Her true feelings, Jesus Christ. For 34 years, I'd been convinced that Mom's true feelings were that I was the consolation prize daughter, the one you kept around for practical purposes while you saved your real love for the shiny one. Sarah turned to look at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, honest-to-God fear. Like she was finally realizing that all those years of taking me for granted might have consequences. "You knew about this," she said, and her voice was getting that accusatory tone she'd used when we were kids, and she was about to get me in trouble for something I didn't do. "You talked her into changing it." And there it was. Even in this moment, even with the evidence of Mom's true feelings spelled out in legal documents, Sarah's first instinct was to blame me, to make this somehow my fault instead of the natural result of her own choices. "I had no idea," I said, and my voice sounded weird and distant to my own ears. I thought she was leaving everything to you." "Don't lie to me," Sarah snapped, and now the tears were starting. But they weren't sad tears. They were angry tears, frustrated tears. The kind you cry when you realize you've been playing a game with rules you never bothered to learn. You were always manipulating her, always making yourself look like the perfect daughter while making me look bad. I stared at her. I literally could not believe what I was hearing. "Making you look bad? Sarah, you made yourself look bad. I just showed up." "You showed up because you didn't have anything else going on," she shot back. "You never had a real career, never got married, never made anything of yourself. Taking care of Mom was literally the only thing you were good at." The words hit like a slap. Because they weren't entirely wrong, were they? I had built my entire identity around being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who sacrificed. And maybe part of me had resented Sarah for having the freedom to be selfish while I felt obligated to be selfless. But sitting there in that office, watching her try to rewrite history to make herself the victim, I realized something important. I hadn't been sacrificing. I'd been investing. Every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, every time I'd chosen Mom over my own plans, I'd been making deposits into an account I didn't even know existed. And Sarah? Sarah had been making withdrawals. Taking Mom's love and attention and approval without ever paying anything back, assuming that charm and occasional gifts were sufficient payment for a lifetime of preferential treatment. "Mr. Peterson," Sarah said, turning back to the lawyer with that smile she used when she was about to ask for something. "Is there any way to contest this? I mean, my mother was on a lot of medication toward the end. Pain medication can affect judgment. Mrs. Williams was evaluated by her physician when she updated her will," Mr. Peterson said firmly. "She was deemed fully competent to make legal decisions. And frankly, Miss Williams, she anticipated this exact conversation." He reached into his desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. "She asked me to give this to both of you after the reading." My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. Sarah's name was written on the outside in Mom's careful handwriting, but underneath it said, "To be read by both daughters." I opened it carefully, like it might explode. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Mom's familiar script. I read it out loud, my voice getting stronger with each word. "My dear daughters, if you are reading this, then you have heard the contents of my will, and Sarah, you are probably confused and upset. I want you to understand that this decision was not made lightly or in anger, but out of love for both of you. Sarah, you have always been my sunshine. Your smile could light up any room, and your spirit brought joy to my life in ways I can never fully express. You are beautiful and talented and charming, and I know you will make your own way in the world because you have gifts I never had. But gifts and inheritance are different things. Inheritance is earned through presence, through sacrifice, through the 1,000 small acts of love that happen when no one is watching. It is earned through showing up not just when it's convenient, but when it's hard. Your sister earned this inheritance. She earned it by sleeping on my couch so I could have her bed. She earned it by learning to change my IV because she didn't want me to feel like a burden to the nurses. She earned it by being there for every test result, every bad day, every moment when I was scared and needed someone to hold my hand. Sarah, I love you. I have always loved you. But love and inheritance are not the same thing. You will receive my dolls because you always admired them, and enough money to help you get started on building something of your own. Something that is yours because you worked for it, not because you inherited it. I hope someday you will understand that this decision was not about loving one daughter more than the other. It was about recognizing that some daughters show love through their presence, and others show love through their potential. Both are valuable, but only one earns the right to inherit what I have built. With all my love, Mom. The silence after I finished reading was absolute. Sarah was crying now, really crying, and I could see her whole worldview crumbling in real time. All those years of being the favorite, all those assumptions about what that favoritism meant, all those plans she'd probably made based on expectations that had just been revealed as fantasies. "She's wrong," Sarah whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "I loved her. I was busy, but I loved her." "I know you did," I said, and I meant it. But loving someone and taking care of them are different things. "You don't understand," Sarah said, and now she was getting angry again. "You don't understand what it was like being the daughter who was supposed to be perfect all the time. Do you know how exhausting it is to be someone's sunshine? To always have to be on when you visit because that's what she expected from me?" And for the first time, I actually felt sorry for her. Because maybe she was right. Maybe being the favorite was its own kind of prison. Maybe she'd been performing for Mom's approval just as much as I'd been working for it. But then I remembered all those nights I'd stayed awake listening to Mom's breathing. All those mornings I'd helped her shower and get dressed. All those times I'd canceled plans or left work early or rearranged my entire life around her needs. And I remembered that Sarah had had a choice. She could have been present and perfect. She could have been the daughter who showed up and the daughter who shined. She'd chosen to be the daughter who shined from a distance. And now she was learning that distance has a price. "Mr. Peterson," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "What happens now? What do I need to do?" "There are some papers to sign, some accounts to transfer. The house is yours immediately, of course, since you're already living there. We'll need to go through the formal probate process, but that's mostly a formality given how clear your mother's wishes were. The house. My house now. The house I'd been cleaning and maintaining and living in for months, assuming I'd have to find somewhere else to go once Sarah inherited it. The house where I'd grown up feeling like a guest in my own family. "What about Mom's things?" Sarah asked, and I could hear her trying to keep her voice casual. "Her jewelry, her photo albums, The will specifies that you have the right to go through her personal effects and choose items of sentimental value," Mr. Peterson said. "Within reason, of course. The valuable pieces, her mother's ring, the diamond earrings your father gave her, those are part of the estate." Sarah's face went white again. She'd been counting on those pieces. Probably already had them appraised in her head, figured out how much they were worth, maybe even thought about selling them to pay off some of her debts. "This isn't fair," she said, and now she sounded like a child. "This isn't how families are supposed to work. You don't keep score of who visits more or who does more chores. You don't punish people for having their own lives." "You're right," I said, standing up. "You don't keep score." But apparently Mom did. I walked out of that office with my head held high for the first time in my life. Behind me, I could hear Sarah crying and Mr. Peterson's patient voice explaining probate procedures and timelines. But I wasn't really listening anymore. I was thinking about the house. My house. I was thinking about the savings account that would let me finally take a real vacation, maybe even quit my job and figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. I was thinking about all the years I'd spent being invisible, being taken for granted, being the daughter who didn't matter. And I was thinking about Sarah, who was about to learn what it felt like to be the afterthought daughter, who was about to discover that charm and charisma and being someone's favorite might get you through life, but they don't necessarily get you through a will reading. For the first time in my life, I was the one with the power. I was the one with the money and the house and the legal documents that proved I was the daughter who mattered. And Sarah? Sarah was the one who was about to have to figure out how to build a life without the safety net she'd assumed would always be there. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt sad for her, or worried about how this would affect our relationship, or conflicted about whether Mom had made the right decision. But I didn't feel any of those things. I felt vindicated. I felt seen. I felt like the universe had finally corrected a 34-year-old mistake, and I felt ready to enjoy every single second of watching my sister realize that being the favorite doesn't mean shit when the will gets read. The real fun was just beginning. The next few weeks were like living in some kind of alternate universe where I was the main character for the first time in my life. You know that feeling when you're driving and you realize you're actually in the fast lane instead of watching everyone else zoom past you? That's what this felt like, except instead of traffic, it was my entire existence. Sarah called me 3 times the day after the will reading. I let it go to voicemail each time. The first message was angry. "We need to talk about this. This is insane. Call me back." The second was bargaining. "Look, I know you're probably overwhelmed. Maybe we can work something out. I could help you manage the estate." The third was just crying. I saved all 3 messages. I'm not proud of that, but I saved them anyway. Sometimes you need evidence of your victory, you know? The house felt different now that it was officially mine. I walked through the rooms like I was seeing them for the first time. The living room where I'd spent so many hours watching Sarah be the center of attention during family gatherings. The kitchen where I'd made countless meals that Sarah would compliment while Mom beamed at her like she'd cooked them herself. The dining room where Sarah's accomplishments had been celebrated while my steady reliability was just expected. All mine now. The first thing I did was change the locks. Not because I was worried about security, but because I wanted to. Because I could. Because for the first time in my life, I got to decide who was welcome in this house, and I was drunk on that power. I hired a cleaning service. The same one Sarah had suggested Mom use years ago when she was getting too frail to keep up with housework. "It's not that expensive," Sarah had said, "and it would be so much easier for her." But Mom had refused because she didn't want to spend the money, because she was saving it, for me apparently. The cleaning ladies came twice a week now. They did the bathrooms and the floors and all the detail work that I'd been doing myself for months. I paid them with money from Mom's savings account, my savings account, and I felt like a goddamn queen every time they showed up. I bought new furniture, not because the old stuff was broken, but because I wanted to. Mom's ancient couch that had been perfectly good for 20 years got donated to Goodwill. The dining room set that Sarah had always complimented got replaced with something modern and sleek that she would have hated. The porcelain cabinet where Mom's precious dolls had lived, Sarah's dolls now, got moved to the guest room. The guest room, where Sarah would sleep if she ever visited. If I ever let her visit. She kept calling. After the first week, the messages changed tone. Less demanding, more desperate. "I know you're angry, but we're still sisters. We still have each other. Can't we work this out?" Working it out. Like this was some kind of disagreement we could compromise on. Like I hadn't spent my entire life compromising while she took and took and took. I started going through Mom's things with a deliberate slowness that would have driven Sarah crazy if she'd known about it. Every drawer, every closet, every box in the attic. I found photo albums filled with pictures of Sarah's achievements. Her graduation, her first job, her various boyfriends throughout the years. And me? I was in the background of most of them, or behind the camera, or just not there. But I also found something else. Letters. Mom had kept every thank you note, every birthday card, every random thinking of you message either of us had ever sent her. Sarah's were all printed cards with generic messages and her signature. Mine were handwritten letters. Pages and pages of them dating back to when I was in college. Updates about my life, Questions about her health, memories we shared, inside jokes, real conversations written down and saved. Mom had kept them all, every single one, in a box in her closet, organized by year, like they were treasure. I read through them all, and I realized something that made my chest feel tight and warm. Mom had known. She'd known all along who really cared about her. She'd known who was showing up out of love versus who was showing up out of obligation or expectation. She'd known who was present and who was performing. The porcelain dolls were still in the house because Sarah hadn't figured out how to get them yet. They'd been Mom's pride and joy, collected over decades, displayed in a cabinet that took up half the dining room. Worth a fortune, according to the appraisals I'd found in Mom's papers. Sarah's fortune now, all $5,000 worth. I was going through Mom's jewelry box when I found the ring. Not her wedding ring. That was already in the safe deposit box that I now had access to. This was different. A simple gold band with a small diamond that I'd never seen before. There was a note wrapped around it in Mom's handwriting. For my caregiver daughter, who earned this through love. I slipped it on my finger, and it fit perfectly. That's when Sarah decided to show up unannounced. I was in the kitchen, making myself lunch in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday because I could. Because I'd finally used some of that inheritance money to quit my job and take some time to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. I was wearing pajamas at 2 p.m. like some kind of lottery winner, which I guess I basically was. The doorbell rang, and I looked out the window to see Sarah's car in the driveway. She'd clearly been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd worn to the will reading 2 weeks ago. I almost didn't answer. I stood there in my pajamas, looking at my sister through the window, and I realized I had a choice. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could make her stand there and ring the doorbell and knock on the door that she didn't have a key to anymore. I could make her feel what it was like to be shut out. But then I realized something better. I could let her in. I could let her see what her choices had cost her. I could let her see me thriving in the space she'd assumed would be hers. I opened the door. "Jesus, you look like shit," I said, because I could. Because I didn't have to be the nice sister anymore. I didn't have to be the one who smoothed things over and made everyone comfortable. I was the one with the power now. "Can I come in?" she asked, and her voice was small and defeated. "It's my house," I said, stepping aside. "I guess I can decide who's welcome." She walked in like she was entering a museum, looking around at the changes I'd made, the new furniture, the empty spaces where her inheritance used to be displayed. Her eyes stopped on the kitchen table, where I'd spread out all the bank statements and investment documents I'd been reviewing, all the numbers that represented my new life. "You changed everything," she said. "I changed what I wanted to change," I replied. "It's amazing what you can do when you don't have to ask permission." She sat down at the table without being invited, and I saw her eyes scanning the financial documents. I could practically see her doing the math, adding up the numbers, calculating exactly how much she'd lost. "I came to apologize," she said finally. "For what?" I asked, sitting down across from her in my own chair in my own house. For not being there more. For not helping more with Mom. For taking you for granted." The words sounded rehearsed, like she'd been practicing them in the car, trying to figure out what combination of syllables might unlock the vault of guilt she assumed I was carrying around. "Okay," I said. "Apology noted." She waited like she expected me to say more. Like I was supposed to accept her apology and somehow make this easier for her. When I didn't, she tried a different approach. "I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but Mom wouldn't want us to let this ruin our relationship. She'd want us to work together, to support each other." "Really?" I asked. Because Mom had 6 months to change her mind about this will. She had 6 months to decide that maybe she should split things evenly, or maybe she should leave you more than $5,000. She didn't. So I'm thinking maybe Mom was pretty clear about what she wanted. Sarah's face crumpled. "You're enjoying this," she said. "Yeah," I said. "I am. I'm enjoying the fuck out of this." "This isn't you," she said. "You're not cruel. You're not vindictive. You're the nice sister, remember? You're the one who takes care of everyone." "I was the nice sister," I corrected. "I was the sister who took care of everyone. But taking care of everyone was my job when I didn't have any other choice. Now I have choices, and I'm choosing to take care of me." "What about taking care of your family?" she asked, and I could hear the desperation creeping back into her voice. "My family?" I laughed. "Sarah, when was the last time you took care of me?" When was the last time you asked how I was doing, or if I needed anything, or if I was okay? When was the last time you treated me like family instead of like hired help? That's not fair, she said. You're right, I said. It's not fair. It wasn't fair that I spent my 20s and 30s taking care of Mom while you built your career. It wasn't fair that I slept on the couch for 2 months while you sent flowers. It wasn't fair that you got to be the fun daughter while I got to be the responsible one. But you know what? Life isn't fair. And sometimes the unfairness works out in your favor. She was crying again, but these weren't the pretty tears she'd cried at the funeral. These were ugly, desperate tears. The kind you cry when you realize you've been playing a game you never understood, and you've lost everything. I need help, she said finally. I'm in debt. I've got credit card payments and student loans and my car payment, and I was planning on You were planning on Mom's money to bail you out, I finished. Yes, she whispered. I was. I'm sorry, but I was. I thought that's what family was for. Family is for helping each other, I said. But you never helped me. You just expected me to help you. And now you're asking me to help you with the money I inherited because I did help Mom. Do you see how fucked up that is? Please, she said. I'm not asking for everything. I'm just asking for enough to get back on my feet. You have hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could spare $50,000 and not even notice it. $50,000, like it was nothing. Like it was pocket change I could just hand over to make her life easier. Like I was still the sister whose job it was to fix things for everyone else. You're right, I said. I could spare $50,000. I could spare $100,000. I could pay off all your debt and buy you a new car and set you up with a trust fund that would make sure you never had to worry about money again. Hope flickered in her eyes. But I'm not going to, I continued, because you didn't earn it. Because you spent 34 years assuming you'd inherit everything without ever doing anything to deserve it. Because you treated me like I was disposable and Mom like she was a bank account with a heartbeat. You're punishing me, she said. No, I said. I'm just not rewarding you. There's a difference. She stood up and I could see her trying to pull herself together, trying to find some dignity in this moment. Fine, she said. Keep your money, keep your house. Keep your perfect little life that you got by being Mom's favorite. I wasn't Mom's favorite, I said quietly. You were. You were always her favorite. But being someone's favorite doesn't mean you get to inherit their life. It means you get to inherit their love. And you did. You got 34 years of being the daughter who made her smile just by walking into the room. You got to be the daughter she bragged about to her friends. You got to be the daughter who could do no wrong. Then why? Because being loved and being rewarded are different things, I said. Because inheritances aren't about feelings. They're about actions. They're about who shows up when showing up is hard. They're about who earns the right to carry on someone's legacy. So what am I supposed to do now? She asked. What everyone else does, I said. Figure it out. Get a second job. Sell some stuff. Ask friends for help. Do all the things you would have done if you'd never expected to inherit anything in the first place. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she said. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm just not doing anything for you, and maybe that's the first time in your life you've had to deal with that, but it's not actually my problem. She headed for the door, and I thought she was going to leave, but then she turned back. You know what? She said. Maybe you're right. Maybe I did take you for granted. Maybe I did assume things would work out a certain way. But at least I didn't spend my whole life keeping score. At least I didn't turn love into a transaction. You're absolutely right, I said. You didn't keep score. You just assumed you were winning. After she left, I sat in my kitchen, my beautiful, renovated kitchen in my house that I owned free and clear, and I felt something I'd never felt before, complete and total satisfaction. Not just happiness, not just relief, but the deep, bone-deep satisfaction of knowing that the universe had finally balanced the scales. I made myself a cup of coffee with my fancy new coffee maker that I'd bought because I wanted it and I could afford it. I sat at my kitchen table looking at the financial documents that represented my new life, and I felt like I'd won the lottery. Because I had, in a way, I'd won the lottery of being the daughter who showed up. The daughter who earned it. The daughter who deserved it. That night, I called Mom's lawyer and asked about setting up a trust fund. Not for Sarah, fuck that, but for me. Something that would make sure I never had to worry about money again. Something that would let me travel, maybe go back to school, maybe start a business, maybe do all the things I'd never been able to do because I'd been too busy being responsible. That's a smart decision, Mr. Peterson said. Your mother would be proud. My mother would be proud. Of me. Finally, after 34 years of being the background daughter, the reliable daughter, the daughter who didn't get the spotlight but kept the lights on, my mother would be proud. I hung up the phone and looked around my house. Really looked at it. This wasn't just a house anymore. This was my reward. This was my prize for a lifetime of showing up. This was proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe gets it right. Sarah could keep her $5,000 and her porcelain dolls. I got everything else. I got the house and the money and the satisfaction of knowing that I'd won the only game that mattered. The game of earning love instead of assuming it. And tomorrow, I was going to start spending my inheritance on myself, on my future, on the life I'd earned by being the daughter who stayed. For the first time in my life, I was the winner. And I was going to enjoy every fucking second of it. 6 months later, I was sitting on my back porch, the back porch of my house that I'd renovated with my inheritance money, sipping wine that cost more than Sarah's monthly car payment, when I got a text from her. The first one in 3 months. Happy birthday. Just that. 2 words. No emoji, no explanation, no attempt at rebuilding bridges. Just an acknowledgement that she remembered the date, probably because Facebook reminded her. I stared at the message for a long time. My 35th birthday. The first one I'd celebrated in my own house as the owner. The first one where I'd thrown myself a party, a real party, with catered food and good wine and friends who actually showed up because they wanted to celebrate me, not because they felt obligated to. Sarah hadn't been invited, obviously. I could have responded. I could have said thank you, or asked how she was doing, or made some gesture toward reconciliation. 6 months ago, I probably would have. 6 months ago, I still would have felt guilty about having something she didn't. I still would have felt responsible for managing her feelings about the consequences of her own choices. But 6 months of living as the main character in my own life had changed me in ways I was still discovering. I deleted the message without responding. Because here's what I'd learned. Guilt is a luxury you can only afford when you have something to feel guilty about. And I didn't. I hadn't manipulated Mom. I hadn't lied or schemed or stolen anything. I'd just shown up, consistently, for decades. And when it mattered, that showing up had mattered more than Sarah's charm or her smile or her ability to make Mom feel special during her brief visits. I'd spent so many years thinking that being the reliable daughter was a consolation prize. That being the one who handled the hard stuff was somehow less valuable than being the one who brought joy. I'd been wrong about that. So fucking wrong. Reliability isn't a consolation prize. It's the foundation everything else is built on. And when the foundation is strong enough, it can support everything, including a $500,000 inheritance that recognizes exactly what that reliability was worth. The house was everything I'd dreamed it could be now. I'd gutted the kitchen and turned it into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I'd converted Mom's old bedroom into a home office where I was building a consulting business, helping other people navigate elder care, because apparently all those years of managing Mom's medical care had given me skills other people were willing to pay for. I'd traveled. For the first time in my adult life, I'd taken a real vacation. Not a long weekend or a day trip, but a month in Europe where I ate expensive food and slept in nice hotels and didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. I'd sent postcards to a few friends, but not to Sarah. I'd wanted to, not to be cruel, but because for the first time in my life, I had experiences worth sharing that didn't involve taking care of someone else. But I didn't send them. Because I was learning the difference between wanting to share your joy and wanting to flaunt your victory. One was healthy. The other was just another form of keeping score. I'd dated. Actual dating, not just the occasional dinner with men who were looking for someone to take care of them the way I'd taken care of Mom. I'd met someone, actually. David was a contractor who'd helped with the house renovations, and he was the first man I'd ever been with who seemed genuinely impressed by my competence instead of intimidated by it. He was the first person who'd ever seen me as the main character in my own story, instead of the supporting character in someone else's. "You're different than I expected," he'd said after our 3rd date. "Different how?" I'd asked. "More substantial, like you know who you are." I'd laughed because I was still figuring out who I was. But he was right about one thing. I was substantial now. I had substance. I had weight. I had presence in my own life. Sarah, from what I'd heard through mutual friends, was not doing well. She'd had to move in with a roommate. She'd taken a second job. She'd sold most of Mom's dolls, the ones that were supposed to be so sentimental to her, to pay off some credit card debt. She'd been dating a series of men who seemed primarily interested in what she could do for them rather than what they could build together. I should have felt bad about that. The old me would have felt terrible about it. The old me would have found ways to help without her asking, would have made excuses for her, would have somehow made her problems my responsibility. But I didn't feel bad. I felt satisfied. Not in a cruel way, but in a cosmic justice kind of way. Sarah was learning what it felt like to live without a safety net. She was learning what it felt like to have to earn things instead of expecting them. She was learning what the rest of us had always known, that life is work, and work is what gives life meaning. Maybe she'd figure it out. Maybe she'd discover that she was more capable than she'd ever realized when she didn't have anyone to fall back on. Maybe she'd find her own version of substance, her own way of being the main character in her own story. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd spend the rest of her life feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond her control, never understanding that the circumstances were exactly what she'd created through decades of small choices. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. It wasn't my job to fix her life or manage her feelings or make her consequences easier to bear. It wasn't my job to be the supporting character in her story of learning to be an adult. For the first time in my life, my only job was to live my own life. And I was fucking excellent at it. The wine was nearly gone, and the sun was setting behind the trees that belonged to me now. I'd planted new flowers in the garden. Flowers I'd chosen because I liked them, not because they were practical or low maintenance or what Mom would have wanted. The whole yard was starting to look like something I'd designed instead of something I'd inherited. I thought about Mom sometimes, not with guilt or regret, but with a kind of peaceful gratitude. She'd seen me, really seen me. Not just the daughter who showed up, but the daughter who deserved to be rewarded for showing up. She'd understood that love and inheritance were different things, and she'd had the courage to make that distinction even when she knew it would cause drama. She'd given me more than money. She'd given me permission to value myself. She'd given me proof that my choices mattered, that my sacrifices had meaning, that my presence had been worth something all along. And she'd given me the tools to build a life where I never had to be invisible again. That night, I raised my glass to the empty yard and said, "Thanks, Mom, for finally showing Sarah and everyone else that you always favored me too. You just favored me in the way that mattered most." The will reading had wiped the smirk off Sarah's face, all right. But more than that, it had put a smile on mine. A smile that was mine to keep. A smile that belonged to the daughter who'd earned it. The daughter who'd won, finally.